Yeah. Okay. On to number 10, which is the license appeal hearing. What do we got here? Mr. John A. Saunders. Mr. Saunders is appealing revocation of his license privileges. So, Mr. Stockton, the correct way to deal with this hearing, first of all, my understanding, we hear no public comment on this. And do we need to be sworn in for any testimony he gives?
Yeah. This one is under NAC 501-135 sub 1. So what you do is...
So push your button so we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, so the procedure spelled out in Nevada Administrative Code, section 501.185, and the steps are clearly laid out there. First thing you need to do is enter the request for hearing and notice of hearing in the record. We've got that done pretty much. Do either the department or, I guess you should do this, but
okay.
It's called exclusion of witnesses. So if there's going to be any witnesses, like who would listen to somebody else's, do you have any witnesses?
No, sir.
Okay.
Does the department have any witnesses?
No, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So the next thing, does anybody have any preliminary motions or stipulations?
Preliminary motions, stipulations? None.
Okay. All right. And then the department is supposed to be present its evidence and then be cross-examined by Mr. Saunders.
Okay, so the department will go first, sir, and then have you.
Okay, for the record, Chief Game Warden Rob Bonamici. You have before you 5 exhibits. The first exhibit being citation number 89209, issued to Mr. Saunders. On that exhibit, you'll also see the back of the citation where it indicates that Mr. Saunders was convicted of a code 6011, which is 12 demerit points. And also I bring your attention to the front of the citation, just for clarification about the middle of the citation. It shows on there demerits, and it shows a 12 there, indicating that Mr. Saunders was advised at the time that this citation carried 12 demerit points in the event of a conviction. Exhibit 2 is the notification to Mr. Saunders advising him that his privileges will be revoked pursuant to our statute and regulations. And then exhibit 3 is Mr. Saunders had contacted me via telephone, and we had conversation, and he requested that his case be heard in Las Vegas, and I saw no problem with that and advised him that the next available meeting in Las Vegas would be this meeting here, and he was more than willing to postpone it to this meeting, his hearing. And then exhibit 4 is the violation, the first one, obstructing, hindering, or otherwise interfering with an officer, employee, or agent of the department. NRS 501-385, showing that that is indeed 12 demerit points. And that concludes the state's exhibits.
Okay, so now we have cross-examination
Correct.
by the appellant. Did you have any questions for Mr. Bonamici about any of his evidence?
I have no questions to him. My name's John A. Saunders, and I want to thank the gentleman for getting me to come before y'all. I am very disturbed about all this because not all of it's true. I'm 80 years old, and I won't live out of the 3 years to get my license back. And most states, or not most states, but a lot of states, their senior citizens don't even have to buy a license. And the one net, the 4-foot net that my grandson was throwing, y'all made it a legal net now. It was illegal at the time. And I've got 2 nets on the boat. My boat is registered, all safety equipment, and I've fished that lake for 50 years and spent a lot of money out there, and it's my life. I'd like to spend, whether it's 2 weeks, 10 weeks, or 2 years, being able to fish. The way it's written up, I can't even fish in certain other states.
Okay, so we can ask, the commission can ask questions of Mr. Bonamici about the evidence that he has presented?
Correct.
Let's go with Vice Chairman Lent, and then we'll move down to Mr. Howell.
Mr. Bonamici, would you please explain the offense in more detail, exactly what happened, so I have a better understanding of it?
I could do better than that if you like. I have the officer, Karen Weldon, here to explain exactly what happened. She was the individual.
I'd like to get a better understanding of it, because just from reading the report, thank you.
I didn't understand what you said.
We're just going to ask the arresting officer, or the person who issued, the officer who issued the citation, to explain exactly what the citation is for.
Do you want me to go into the whole series of how this came to be, sir? Would you like me to start with how this case started? It was an OGT call, is how it originated.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, on the day of question, which was 10/31/09, I received a call from my dispatch, and they indicated that there was a OGT call, Operation Game Thief call, about 3 or 4 boats in the Las Vegas wash arm of Lake Mead that had oversized shad nets. They also said some people on shore were also fishing with oversized shad net for the threadfin shad, which is the bait fish for stripers. So I went up on the ridge there, a 33 hole, with my binoculars and looked down onto the water, and I found 3 boats, possibly 4, that had nets that looked oversized. The reason that there only can be a 3-foot radius, 6-foot diameter at the time. Like Mr. Saunders said, now the regulation's been changed to a 4-foot radius, 8-foot diameter. When I look down there, the way I can tell measurements, and it's rough, but I also had a tape measure when I did check his for legality. But on my legs, and I know this sounds sort of weird, but when I measure the horn of the shad net, my legs are about 3 feet long. So when I see an individual down there that has a net that's up near their head, even if they're 5'8", 5'6", obviously that would be a very large net. When I looked down on 33 hole with my binoculars, Mr. Saunders was on a pontoon boat. It was rust and cream colored. There were 3 individuals on his boat. He was the operator of the vessel. There were also 2 other boats. There was a blue and white bayliner that I contacted that day, and there was also like a little aluminum boat, and they also had oversized shad nets. There was possibly a 4th bayliner, or excuse me, Boston whaler that I saw, but I wasn't able to find them later on that day. After I documented, and I have the notes that I wrote down, if you want to see them, on what I saw from my vantage point, but what I saw on the pontoon boat that Mr. Saunders was operating was that 2 of the individuals on his boat were using nets that looked oversized. I guessed in my approximation, because I've dealt with this regulation, I've been a game warden for 15 years, that possibly one was about a 4-foot radius and one was probably about a 5-foot radius from my just estimation there of views. So after I made my documentation on what I saw on the boats, all the boats and the people that I could see, I went onto my patrol boat, and then I contacted these vessels on the water. I first went to the blue and white bayliner. They were anchored, 2 men were on board that one. But as I started to speak with them, I saw the pontoon boat was leaving the area. So I said, gentlemen, can you continue fishing? I'll be back. I need to contact them and just talk to them first. So I went up to Mr. Saunders' boat, introduced myself as a game warden. I said, sir, I'd like to check your fishing licenses and any fish you might have on board. He goes, you've checked me many times before. You know I'm legal. I said, well, maybe so, sir. I mean, I can't remember if I have or not. But I said, I don't know these other individuals on here. I'd like to check their licenses, too. So I pulled up alongside, and I checked their licenses and the safety equipment. They have proper fishing licenses, and they did have the boating safety equipment that's required for their vessel. I then asked what they were fishing for, and they said striper, and I said, are you using shad for bait? And they indicated yes. I asked if I could see the shad nets. First net that was given to me was in a plastic container, as they're usually sold in, and I opened it up, and it's perfectly dry. It hasn't hit the water. There's even a piece of paper, it was brand new, that was in the bottom of this plastic case that wasn't even wet. So I said to and this was a legal 3-foot radius, 6-foot diameter net. I asked Mr. Saunders, I said, well, sir, this one hasn't even been used yet today. And he goes, oh, yes, it is. This is the one we've been using. I said, sir, it's perfectly dry. It has never been used. And he kept debating with me, saying that, yes, it had been used. And I said, sir, it's not wet. It hasn't hit the water today. So I said, I need to see the other shad nets, the ones that I observed up on top that I believed to be oversized. So I asked him for the other nets. He kept indicating that was the only net he had. Finally, one of the other gentlemen on board his boat, Rios Paver, he handed me the 4-foot net. Again, I have a tape measure. I measured it to make sure. The legal one was 3 feet. The one Mr. Paver handed me was 4 foot in radius. I said to Mr. Saunders, I said, sir, this one is oversized. And he goes, no, it looks 3 feet to me. And I said, well, sir, it is actually 4 feet. And he said, well, it looks 3 feet to me. It is 3 feet. And I said, no, sir, look at the tape measure. And I tried to show him. So then I said, okay, and I need to see the really big net. I need to see that big white one that I saw this other young man use, which turned out to be Kevin Saunders. And I said, sir, I need to see that big white one. And Mr. Saunders kept saying to me, we only have these 2 nets aboard. These are the only 2 nets we've used today. I said, no, sir. I said, first, the one's dry, hasn't hit the water today. Second one, the 4-foot one, yes, but there's this big one because when I saw this gentleman holding it, Kevin Saunders, it was near his head. It was approximately 5 feet in my estimation, or 6 feet, depending on how big Kevin Saunders was. I kept asking Mr. Saunders, can you please give me that net? I know you have another one on board, and it's a very large one. It's white. And he kept saying, these are only 2 ones we have on board. These are only 2 ones. And he kept debating with me and wouldn't provide it. And so I said to him, I said, well, can I come on board? And I said, you know, if you have it on board, can I come on board and get it? And he indicated like it was okay to come on board. So I tied up my vessel, went on board his vessel, and sure enough, I found the net. It was hidden under the bench of the stern seat there on the pontoon boat. I said, Mr. Saunders, here it is. And he goes, well, sure it is. And he goes, that's my net, I know that. Well, by the time I got from the beginning of my contact to this point, I'd wasted a lot of my time. He kept lying to me persistently. He impeded my investigation. I had to come on board the boat to actually get it. And so anyways, I cited him for hindering a game warden. I cited the other 2 gentlemen on board because they were the actual ones using the oversized nets for using the oversized shad net. So I issued 3 citations to his vessel. After I left there, and he said a couple things to me as I left because he wasn't too pleased with my actions, then, and I seized the illegal nets because that was my evidence for court, although he never challenged me in court. I went to the other 2 vessels and wrote a citation to the blue and white Bayliner and also to the aluminum boat. Do you have questions?
Okay, we had Mr. Howell, and then we'll have Mr. Macbeth. Questions?
Yes, sir.
It sounded to me like Mr. Saunders, present here, didn't actually throw the larger net. It was his grandson, I presume?
Is Kevin your grandson or your son, sir?
My grandson.
Okay. Yes, sir. It was Kevin Saunders, his grandson, and then another gentleman named Rios Paver. So my citation was not to Mr. Saunders for the actual throwing of the oversized shad net. It was for hindering my investigation of it, just because it just got so delayed with him constantly lying to me and debating with me.
Oh, I see.
Because in the 501-385, what I wrote the citation for, you cannot obstruct, interfere with an investigation, or do anything that delays a game warden in their authorization and investigation skills of any of the violations of our provisions.
Hey, Mr. Macbeth?
Yes, thank you. I actually don't have a question for you. It sounds like you did a good investigation, and I'm not challenging any of that. But I think there's a legal issue here. Maybe the DAG can address this. Mr. Saunders pled guilty to this ticket. I think that's the end of it. We don't need to go through all of this. The bottom line here is that when he pleads guilty, we've now established what the crime was, and we're really, the legal term is collaterally stopped from revisiting this issue. It's a done deal. If he wanted to challenge the charge, then he needed to do that in the proceeding where the, you know, where the ticket was issued in justice court or wherever it is. That's where that needs to be done.
Okay.
The fact that he pled guilty to this, it's a done deal, and I'd like to see us move on.
I think we have an answer to that.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, well, it's, as far as the citation, Mr. Saunders pled guilty, so that's correct. You can't change that. Mr. Saunders does have a due process right to a hearing before this board that's established in the statute, and that's why he's here. If he has some evidence to show that the 12 demerits was improperly assessed or something like that, you might be able to do something, but the board cannot change any of the facts or the fact that Mr. Saunders pled guilty to the violation. So your authority is very limited because you can't, in effect, if you said the violation didn't happen, then you'd be saying the district court was wrong, and you can't do that. Does that make sense?
Okay.
To follow up,
Clarify.
I guess what I'd like to know is you know, this is unfortunate. I'm wondering what kind of discretion the commission has with regard to this 3-year period. In other words, you know, do we have any say in that, or is that also fixed by statute, and we're just literally our hands are tied? That's my main question.
If I may, on the exhibits, the
Barnage?
last page on Exhibit 4, well, second page right after the violation. Number 2, or NAC 501-210, revocation of license permit or privilege upon accumulation of 12 points. The department will revoke any hunting, fishing, or trapping license privileges if that person accumulates 12 or more demerit points within a 60-month period. And then on number 1, for 3 years if the demerit points are accumulated within a 40-month or 42-month period and are not assessed because of a conviction of a felony or gross misdemeanor. So the 12 points did occur within 42 months, obviously. They occurred out of one event. And if I might just also add as an aside, I've spent quite a bit of time in the field with Officer Weldon, and we kind of have a philosophy, everybody gets a free lie. But when people repeatedly lie and deceive us, then, you know, at times we do have to take other action.
I have a brief question on this. Maybe I'm reading it wrong here now. Paragraph 1 and paragraph 2 appear to, I mean, one says 3 years, one says 2 years, 60-month period, 42-month period. Oh, okay, never mind. I see. One's a 60 months, so if they did it between 42 and 60, that's the 2-year. Okay.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Shrum, you have something?
Yes. Mr. Saunders, you had a prior conviction back in 1991, says here prohibited fishing method, but now in this case, you were in possession of the net, but you weren't actually using the net. Is that correct?
We'll cross-examine him. He hasn't given us evidence yet, right? Oh, he did? Okay.
Is that correct, sir, that you had a net in your possession, but you weren't actually using it?
Yes, sir, and I was throwing it. And I wasn't trying to catch shad at the time. I was trying to learn how to throw that bigger net.
Yeah. I was just curious about that because you've been assessed.
Matter of fact, I taken all the weights off it and everything, used on other smaller nets because I couldn't throw it. I wasn't like those Hawaiians. They can throw one longer than me to him.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't throw it, so I spent my money for nothing. And I'm not in here to degrade the officer, but she said I was leaving the wash. We were not leaving the wash. We hadn't caught any fish. I was trying to find some fish with my fish finder. And she's checked me several times. She checked me one night on the night. And was very respectful to her. If I involved in interfering with her, she'd had to put the handcuffs on me. We did not interfere with her. That part is not fully truthful. And I won't go into all that. I paid my fine, which the judge reduced it to half, but I would like to be able to finish out my life on that lake, which I love, with my kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, and friends. And by the way, the day that she stopped us, there's a guy with us, Goro's friend. He didn't have a license. He told me on the way out there he had a license. But when we got on the lake, he said he didn't have any. I set him down. Wouldn't even let him, he's going to learn how to throw the net. I said, no. I don't allow anybody on that boat without a fishing license. And I dare any fisherman in the state of Nevada or the Western Hemisphere to make that statement and it'd be true. But I would like some way, somehow, get my fishing rights back for that lake. Because I won't be around in 2012.
Okay, we have Mr. Howell, and then Mr. Shrum. Mr. Howell, and then Mr. Shrum. Questions, comments?
I guess my question is, do we have the authority to give him back his fishing license?
I've been looking. I can't find anything that would allow the commission to lessen the penalty that's prescribed by the statute. So since he pled guilty to the charges have 12 demerit points automatically. I don't think you have discretion. The only thing is if there was some error and that there shouldn't really be 12 points, but it's clearly 12 points, and so I don't think the commission has any discretion at all.
Mr. Shrum, Jeff?
Mr. Saunders, just one last question. At any time were you cautioned that if you pleaded guilty, that you would be assessed 12 demerits and you would lose your license? Did you have any sort of legal counsel at all?
Well, I didn't know how many it was, and I don't keep up with it that close, to be honest with you. But it seems to me that an officer or just a game warden has the right to assess the fine, assess the demerits, and all of just writing the ticket. If I'd have knew this, I didn't even know I was going to get anything from you people. When the judge released me the day when I paid the fines, he said, "You're free to go." Well, hell, when I got that letter from his office in Reno, I didn't know what to do. I was just totally upset, and still am.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, appreciate it. I guess one final question for the DAG. What we're reading here are regulations, and I'm wondering if there's just any leeway in the statute at all that maybe these regulations are too firm. I kind of doubt it, but that's really the only thing that I can think of.
I actually have only been reading the statutes. I haven't gotten to the regulations yet to see if there's any discretion. So generally, administrative bodies don't have equitable power. If he appeals it to the district court, they have equitable power. But
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Capurro, and then Mr.
Just a quick question, Brian. Even if we could, they couldn't be applied retroactively anyway, could they? I mean, the current regulation is 12 demerits. Right. We couldn't say, well, we're going to change the regulation and apply it to your case, which happened at some time in the past. It can't be prospective. It is prospective, not retrospective.
I don't think I can provide you a clear answer with that. You can, I know the legislature can make laws that are retroactive, but they have to clearly specify that they are retroactive. And so I don't know if you can, I can't answer that. I don't know if you can do it with regulations or not. And I don't think you could do it now, obviously, to fix this problem. Okay, and
that was my question, because you could possibly do it retroactively, but it wouldn't affect cases that were decided under the old regulation.
Remember, he pled guilty to interfering with the police.
Yes.
Or with a game warden, which, I mean, are you talking about amending that to make it less points retroactive?
I assumed that that's what he was talking about, but that would be the only way that you could do it. And my question is, can you do it retroactively when you have an actual case that occurred and apply it?
I'd have to research that. I've never come across that.
Mr. Kevin?
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask both parties a little about the demeanor of this conversation. I understand there was some evasiveness and whatnot, but was there anything threatening or anything to the office or?
No, sir.
No, sir, he wasn't, I didn't feel like a hostileness where he was going to physically attack me. It was just verbally, he just kept denying that they had the net on board and just repeatedly lied to me. And so there wasn't any physical feeling that I was going to be harmed in that nature.
Matter of fact, to her, I spoke yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. But she seemed upset when she first came up. I was trying to joke with her. And I don't know whether I'm out of order by answering the question or not, but I didn't come in here for this at all. But y'all changed y'all's rules too, because you changed from a 3-foot net to 4-foot net. This organization did. So there's other rules that can be changed too.
Okay, just looking at this, one thing on the first would be the page here. It says, in the event of an unsuccessful appeal before the commission, the period of suspension or revocation begins on the date of the determination made by the commission. So if it was unsuccessful appeal, but I mean, it's kind of you could say, well, it's our fault that we didn't have a commission meeting in Las Vegas earlier, but I see here you're talking about, so is that, here, exhibit 2, that paragraph? Go ahead.
By this
while he's looking
letter,
at
I mean, in the event of an unsuccessful, that means there could be a successful appeal?
Like I said, if the department had made a mistake and this was really an 8-point offense and not a 12-point offense, then you could say, oh, that was only an 8-point offense. But you can't find that Mr. Saunders was innocent after he's pleaded guilty in district court, right?
Okay, we had another question down, 2 of them here, Mr. Shrum and then Mr. Howell. And we'll get moving on.
Does, or would Mr. Saunders have any other further, say, right of appeal or any place else to go to, where he might have a reduction in these points? Because the 12 points is for obstructing, hindering, or otherwise interfering with an officer, employee, or agent of the department. And that's open to interpretation.
I think he's asking you.
No, it was open to interpretation by the district court. However, the district court has already ruled on that, and you can't change the district court's ruling. Commission doesn't have that authority.
Okay, Mr. Howell?
Because the district court cut the fine in half, it seems like they opened the door for us to cut the merits in half.
Ooh, no?
No.
Mr. Chairman?
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Capurro.
Would it be possible the conviction was December 16th of '09, or the citation was written December?
No, it was written on 10/31 of '09, sir, but it had to be taken care of in the Henderson Justice Court by the 16th of December.
10/31 of '09.
But at the bottom there, where you see the address for the Henderson Court, and then the date there, that was when he needed to take care of it, either by seeing the judge and doing an arraignment or by paying the citation.
The date on this that I see is 16th day of December '09, is that?
Look up in the middle of the citation, sir, please. After his name and his personal information, you'll see that the offense occurred on
10/31/09.
Pardon me?
10/31/09.
Yes, sir.
Okay, my point is that, is it possible to assess the suspension from the date of either the citation or the guilty plea, rather than from the date of this commission meeting?
I think I could defend that.
Go for it. Yeah, I mean, the statute does read from the date of conviction. So I think we're good there.
Okay, 'cause this, if I could just, this thing here said, it stated privileges be eligible for reinstatement on March 5th, 2012, in the letter that was given to Mr. Saunders. So that's not necessarily so?
We could amend that, depending what the commission's desire is here. The bottom line here is, we have a system we're obligated to follow.
Copy.
We followed it. We understand, we all have some sympathy for Mr. Saunders due to his age and condition and so forth. But I also would ask that you consider, had he applied for a big game tag and made a mistake and wasn't given a big game tag and said, I'm not going to be here in 2012, give me a big game tag. You know, so we've got rules we got to follow. They're in place for a reason. Yeah, my heart goes out to Mr. Saunders, but
All right.
you know, we
So
got to do what we got to do.
We are currently on, let's see, present any rebuttal evidence. Do we have any rebuttal evidence by the department for anything that Mr. Saunders said? Okay. Any further? Any further rebuttal evidence? Mr.
No, sir.
Saunders, do you have any further rebuttal of anything the department has stated?
Just like I said, you changed the rules from a 3-foot net to a 4-foot net, from a illegal to a legal net. So with that in mind, you can change the rules on these. And I can't, where the letter reads that you sent to me, there's a lot of states that I can't even go get a license in or even try to get one in. And I've abided by your rules. You can ask any officer for 50 years that I've fished that lake out there.
Okay. Mr. Howell, let's see, we had a question by the commission on issues limited to the rebuttal evidence. Okay. Do we have any questions from the commission on issues limited to the rebuttal evidence? Okay. We have one?
I just want to comment. When you said he didn't break the rules, I mean, you did, because the rule
Yes.
was, so you did violate the rules at the time, the way I understand it, and you did violate the rules, and you did plead guilty to the charge, so that leaves us with not much discretion. I hope you understand that.
Okay, we'll have a chance for deliberation here in just a second. Closing arguments. I'm just trying to go down the list of the rules here we got to follow. Closing arguments. First Department, any closing argument?
No, sir.
Okay. Any closing argument, Mr. Saunders?
Nothing except just what I asked for, and that's all I need.
Okay. Commission now deliberate and then render orally its order with separately stated findings of fact and conclusions of law. Department has burden of proof in a hearing. So we can now deliberate. Go ahead.
You know, I really sympathize because of his age, and you always like to see sportsmen go out and fish and that, and to deprive him of his ability to do that at this age in his life, you know, really bothers me a lot. But it also bothers me that he pled guilty and he did violate the law, and there's not a lot we could do, and it's really taxing to me to deprive him of a joy that he can do at his age in life. But I don't know what choice we have but to sustain the conviction that he pled guilty to.
Okay. Anybody down here have any closing argument or discussion, deliberation? Okay, discussion, deliberation. I mean, I'll just throw out. I mean, yeah, I concur, Mr. Lent. I mean, it's a tough thing. And Mr. Bonamici stated we all have a lot of sympathy in the fact that he wasn't abusive or otherwise offensive to the department. However, I'm told by the Hill Council that we don't have a lot of choice in the matter. The only choice we may have is, I'm just trying to come up with, our only options here is we can leave it as it is. Our other options would be possibly on from the date, you could, let's see, the date of suspension. So, privileges be eligible for reinstatement, the date at which privileges be eligible for reinstatement. We might be able to put those back to the date of the offense. That's basically our only options. Is there any other options anybody sees? Then we need to, okay, go ahead.
Mr. Bonamici, if I missed something here, tell me, but what did you use as the criteria for the eligibility for reinstatement?
What we use is the court, he was convicted on the 4th of January, I believe it was. Okay, then the officer then obtains the conviction information from the court, sends it through their lieutenant up to our headquarters. And it gets to our headquarters, and then we process the paperwork. You'll see the date on the letter is January 31st. So then we give them, 30 days to appeal it, so we don't start the conviction or the revocation until after they have a chance to appeal it. And that's why you see the March 5th day for some mailing time and 30-day notification.
Is it a set number, or is it what you kind of feel should be applied to this as reasonable?
No, what it is, it's
suspension.
a due process issue that we don't want to say that you lost your privileges on the 4th of the day you were convicted. For example, say they were convicted on, October 4th, and we sent them a letter in December saying, you were convicted on October 4th, your licenses were revoked on October 4th. Well, that means if they hunted a deer or an elk or birds or whatever, they could be prosecuted for that, and that's not fair, and that's not the intent.
I guess my
So that's why we do it this way. It's a due process issue.
Okay.
I guess my point, though, is that could you have chosen a reinstatement date of March 5th, 2011, as a for instance? No. Right,
No,
wrong,
sir.
or indifferent? You
No.
could not have.
No, we don't have that flexibility.
Okay.
We got to go 3 years.
And then we're going to need to find some findings of fact.
Mr. Chairman, I just had a question. Does the department's attorney see an alternative where we could grant any amnesty on this particular case? I'd like to hear from him.
Mr. Commissioner, the NAC 501-200 states a person who is convicted of a wildlife violation will be assessed demerit points pursuant to the following schedule. That schedule lists 12 demerit points if you are convicted of obstructing a game warden. I don't see you have any leeway. It's a 12-point demerit. He pled guilty to it, from my understanding. That took away any flexibility you might have.
Okay. We're looking for some findings of fact. Somebody to move something on findings of fact, and then later on we'll be ready for a motion on conclusions of law. Mr. Macbeth.
Okay, finding number one would be that Mr. John Saunders was issued a misdemeanor citation and complaint on October 31, 2009. And the violation is NRS 501.385. And basically hindering a game warden, repeated lying, would not hand over an illegal sized net. So that's finding number one. Finding number two would be on January 4th, 2010, Mr. John Saunders pled guilty to that violation. The third finding fact is Mr. Saunders was notified that he had 12 demerit points within a 42-month period, and that his license privileges would be suspended for a period of 3 years, with the period of reinstatement March 5th, 2012. Finding number 4 is that the violation charged pursuant to NAC, and I don't have 501, and I'm not sure what the number is.
.210 with 3 years.
.210, referencing NRS section 501.385, obstructing, hindering, or otherwise interfering with an officer, employee, or agent of the department. That violation has 12 demerit points. I think that might be enough for findings of fact.
Okay, we take these as a motion, then we would vote on the findings of fact and the conclusions of law at the same time, all at the same time, or separately? So we want to do them separately, and that was a motion that those 4 items as listed by Commissioner McBeth. Did everybody hear those? It was a motion. It's been properly moved and seconded that the 4 items just listed by Commissioner McBeth are the findings of fact in this appeal hearing of Mr. John Saunders. Any further discussion? Everybody understand the motion? Everybody understand what Mr. McBeth said? Okay, all in favor, signify by stating aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passed unanimously. Oh, okay. We had 1 opposed. Mr. Shrum opposed. And Mr. Vogler opposed. Finding fact. Okay, so we had 6 favor, 2 opposed. Okay, now we're looking for motion passes. Conclusions of law. Six and 2. 8. Then me. I didn't vote. Okay. Conclusions of law. Go ahead, Mr. McBeth.
Okay, the conclusions of law basically would be Mr. John Saunders having been found guilty of a violation under NRS 501.385 for hindering a game warden, which carries with it a number of demerit points of 12. Pursuant to NAC 501.210, Mr. Saunders' hunting, fishing, and trapping license, permit, and privileges issued to him shall be revoked for a period of 3 years as the number of demerit points accumulated were within the last 42 months pursuant to NAC 501.210 subsection 1. Is that good enough?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
The actual demerit points are in NAC 506.200, not .210. So just to clarify that.
I would like to amend the, well, actually, I think that was on the findings of fact as well. Yeah, findings of fact and the conclusions of law. See, in our materials, you have the demerits listed, but it doesn't have the section number. I couldn't tell what it was.
Before we can comment on it, we need to have it seconded, otherwise. Okay, it's been probably moved and seconded. Mr. Lynch, has a comment?
For legal. For legal. Question. Could he appeal this to the court and maybe get a lesser conviction than this violation? Like, say, you get conviction just for a larger net and get it reduced down to less than 12 points, then come back and we could retake a look at it if we could get it less than 12 points?
Probably not, because I think the appeal period's run already, and so he would have had to have done that at the time of the I think you have, I don't do criminal law again, but I think you have 30 days to appeal a criminal conviction as well. And so once that time period's done, then it's a done deal. The district courts have what they call equitable jurisdiction, though, so if he appeals this to a district court, the district court could modify the sentence, but administrative bodies generally don't have equitable jurisdiction. So that probably didn't make any sense, but.
Personally, if I could, if I had a way of throwing this into there, I would have thrown out that in the conclusions of law that it's also would be reasonable to find the 3-year term begins on 31st of October 2009 to be the beginning point of the 3-year suspension, as opposed to March 5th. That would be my preference in this case, but that's not the motion as it's on the floor.
Can we do, excuse me,
Yeah,
Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
Chairman Riggs, Dag Stockton, can we do that?
Why don't we take a break and let me do some ciphering. Math is not my thing.
We need a brief break. We'll have 10 minutes and come right back.